So time to set up rebar for the slab. Now this is number 4 rebar, and I purchased 2 tons of this, minus what we've already installed in the footer. Now if you're interested in how rebar works and a little more information, you can check out my rebar and footers video. I'll link that in the description. So we're going to get started setting this up. So my footer's really deep, and there's a tall leading edge, and you can see the step here. So what we're going to do for this leading edge is we're going to set up 3 rows of rebar in the low end and 2 rows in the high end. And that's to really strengthen up that edge. Now rather than butt the rebar ends together like this on the corners, we want a nice round portion of rebar, and that'll really strengthen up those corners. So all the corners will have bent rebar that we will stagger our joints at. Now I'm using a homemade rebar bender that I made in the shop. Now you don't need to go out and buy a fancy bender. You can figure out how to use about anything to do this. But this thing works pretty good. On this first run of rebar, we're setting it up 3 to 4 inches above the footer. We're just using some 2x4s as spacers as we set these up. And make sure when you're using number 4 rebar that you overlap it by 2 feet. Now we're just using the classic rebar twist ties. Got your tool, spin it up. That's all there is to it. So all the wall portion is done. We did some goofy bends here on the steps to tie that all together nice and strong. You can see how we staggered all our splices there. And you can see how we bended up all the corners like that. So we're starting to lay out our rebar for the pad grid. Now we are going 2-foot spacing with this number 4 rebar. And the standard is 18 inches to 2 feet. We're kind of cutting it real close on rebar, so we're going to go 2 feet. We're using these snap-in rebar chairs. Now these are set at 2 inches, or they keep the rebar at 2 inches away from the pad, and the concrete just flows in underneath them and it sets up. These chairs are just from Lowe's, and you can see there is a deeper divot for your bottom rebar piece and a more shallow divot for your upper rebar piece. And that keeps those in there pretty good. We're probably going to go back and tie these anyways just to be safe. Dad got a patent on his knee pad invention here. All the rebar is done. Oh, me and Dad got baked, as they say, out here in the sun. I barely had enough to get it done. So let's walk around and look at it. So let's talk the price of the day. Now I had already purchased this 2 tons of rebar for roughly $2,000. I talked about that in a previous video. I bought 2,000 ties to do this, so that's roughly 100 bucks. We ended up tying every intersection just to be safe. Really, you could get away with about every other one, but since we're rookies, we're going to be stumbling around out here, and we don't want to knock one of these chairs off or knock something out of the line. And for the chairs, I purchased 200 chairs for around $120 from Lowe's. These are all the 2-inch chairs, and that is a little sparse for this. I have another 100 chairs coming from Amazon that are cheaper, and we're gonna go ahead and stick those in some of these spots where when you're stepping on the rebar it gets kind of close to the gravel. Now the whole purpose of these chairs is to keep your rebar at the proper height in the slab as you're pouring, and you want to be real careful because you don't want any ground contact. For one, the rebar will be doing nothing if it's touching the ground, so that's wasted money, And the other reason is you don't want to make an entry point for rust to get into your grid. I'm going to do your best to avoid that, because if there's a spot that's touching the soil, far more likely to rust, and it will eventually spread through the grid. So I got a bunch of this 1/4-inch steel diamond plate for free from work. It's a little bit rusty. I dug it out of the scrap bin. I'm going to use all of this to build my post brackets for my 6x6 posts that'll be wet set in the concrete. Now you can buy 6x6 heavy duty post brackets, but they're very expensive. So we're going to save a bunch of money and do it this way. Got me a jig built up. Hardly a jig. Anyways, this is just an old chunk of 6x6. So I'm sticking my plates on there, clamping it down, and just tack welding it with the MIG. I'll go back with the stick welder and actually weld it after I get all of them tacked up. I think that's gonna work pretty good. All right, 23 brackets all tacked up. So that was kind of boring. So all these brackets that are just an L shape, those are for the 4 corners. I don't want to have this other leg on here that would kind of throw off my purlings. So L brackets for the corners. All these other brackets are for 3 sides. Now I'll actually need more than 23 brackets, but these are all the brackets I'm building to wet set in the concrete. And the front facing 80-foot side, I will wait and drill those brackets after the fact. And the purpose for that is I need to be really sure on some post placement on that side of the building. So the dimensions on these brackets are, this bottom piece is a little bit over 5.5 inches wide. Same with the brackets, the uprights I mean. And also this portion here is 11 inches tall. I should say most of them are 11 inches tall. There's a few that are shorter, just because I had those pieces already ready. And that's how it worked out with my scrap metal. Well, I've got 20 brackets done. 3 more to go, and some paint. Call that step completed. All in all, this part of the project was a little bit boring actually, but I hope you guys picked up some kind of tips. We'll catch you next time.
Keep thinking.